Welcome to a new episode in our series Scientific Research in the History of Astrology. Today we have a guest from Minneapolis in Minnesota, Professor Charles Obert. Hello, Charlie. Welcome to the show.
Hello to you, and thank you for asking me.
And we will use the support of the computer for this. And we start with a subpage of this cosmology. There you have the address cosmology.vonabisw.de, and there is a subpage called Good Daimon and Bad Daimon in Astrology with Professor Obert. And if you scroll down on this site, you find the homepage of Professor Charles Obert. Here, if you click here, you find his homepage, and we will look into this article, Socrates and his Daimon, and I prepared that for you. Okay, so he has posted a couple of very interesting articles on his journal on the homepage, and here he says, I argued in a former post that we need to take the presence of the gods seriously in the dialogues of Plato. First question, how did you find Plato and his reports about the Daimon in your life, in your biography?
I first began getting seriously interested in Plato fairly recently. It was related to my interest in traditional astrology, because the more deeply I got into traditional astrology, the more I wanted to flesh out my background in our Western and Greek tradition, since Western astrology is the underpinning for Western philosophy, and the whole Western worldview is the underpinning for our traditional astrology. So in terms of interest of Plato, the astrology came first. The philosophy interest in Plato in specific came second. I've been interested in philosophy all my life. It's just the specifically Platonic interest is related to astrology.
So that begs the question, how did you find astrology in your life?
That goes back a while. I was originally interested in tarot. This goes all the way back, just a bit of history there. I grew up in New York City. And while I was growing up, my dad used to work in downtown Minneapolis. I would join him and go to work sometimes. And while he was there working, I'd go down on the street and go about a block and a half up. And there on the other side, there was this big bookstore named Samuel Weiser, which happened to be one of the two biggest occult bookstores in the United States. And I'd spend time browsing in there, found tarot decks. That was right around the time when Aleister Crowley's Thoth deck was first released. And I got interested in that then.
Okay. Mentioning Aleister Crowley, do you have any connection to the Golden Dawn or the heritage of it?
Not formally. I've been interested in Golden Dawn and that magical system for a long time. I'm not currently involved in any organization.
Okay. So when was that when you started with tarot?
Late high school. That would be very late 60s. I was in my late teens.
And did you practice divination with the cards?
Yes, for quite a while. In fact, I did serious reading with tarot for quite a long time before I got into astrology.
For money or for pro bono?
Pro bono.
Okay.
I never really did it professionally.
Okay, so there must have been some switch or adding to that tarot practice, because then somehow you found more esoteric disciplines. What was the next part?
Well, the more you study tarot, it's a whole system of symbolism, and especially Crowley's deck and the Waite deck are coming out of the Golden Dawn system. The astrological symbolism is tied right into the cards. It was a logical next step. So I first learned astrology as explicating tarot symbolism, and then further and further got into it in its own right.
And how did you do that? Did you read books or did you attend courses?
Mainly books. I'm a fanatic reader. You're seeing just a tiny, maybe about, I don't know, 5% of my books in the house behind me or something like that.
Okay.
They're just books all over. By the way, I've yet to meet anyone who's seriously into astrology who isn't phonetically into books.
Okay, I
It
agree
goes
on
with
that.
the turf.
Yeah. Same with me. Do you remember with what books you started?
With astrology?
Yeah.
Modern astrology, when I first really started studying it, that would have been like, say, early 80s that I really got serious about it. There was a series of books called The Only Way to Learn Astrology. I believe it's March and McEvers, right?
Yes, I have them. Yeah, okay. They're a good start.
Right. Yeah, that's what I started. Well, pretty much what was available back then was modern astrology. There was very little traditional astrology available. So there wasn't even modern and traditional, there was just astrology.
Considering the fact what you're doing nowadays, you have a curious mind and you are interested in history. Was that the case when you started with psychological astrology as well? Did you start digging into the history of this modern astrology, find out who started that modern thing, what was before that, or what came that later, that interest?
As my reading on astrology widened more and more, I just started picking up the history of it, kind of started in the current and then moved backward from there. You remember a site that had a big influence on me when I really started reading astrology? You remember astroamerica.com, Dave Roll's site?
No, no.
Okay.
You have to realize I'm from Germany. I know Thomas Ring and
Okay.
and Kepler and books like
Okay.
that.
Okay. Here in the English-speaking astrology world, there was a site called Astro America,
Okay.
Dave Roll, and he was a bookseller and an astrologer in himself and a publisher. But one of the things that he had in his site is he had book reviews on just dozens and dozens and dozens of different astrology books. I would go
Okay.
to find out other books and started searching them out.
Okay. So in the 80s, astrology, like most modern people know it, which is more or less psychological astrology, sort of Jungian astrology. What happened to go into the heresy?
To what happened got me interested in traditional, you mean?
Which is still a sort of heresy to modern astrologers.
Okay, I can stand that. That is quite a bit later. That would be early 2000s. And just in terms of stuff going on in the country and in my life, the consistently positive attitude and outlook on modern astrology became increasingly less and less satisfying to me. And
how did that manifest itself? Did your readings you were not content with the readings you gave, the delineation you made? Something was missing. Was that the case?
some with the readings that I've been doing, and also some with the books I was reading on it. I found increasingly that I resonated more and more and more with earlier and older books. You got to remember, when I first started reading this, when they were talking about older astrologers, they'd talk about Charles Carter.
Okay, yeah.
And he's like
London Astrological Lodge, okay.
Right, exactly. Which is like 1920s, 1930s,
Yes,
1940s. And he'd be described as being so terribly dark and pessimistic and serious, as opposed to we enlightened moderns.
okay.
And I related an awful lot more to what he was saying. It just felt a lot more balanced for me. And then move further back from there, obviously.
But then if you move further back, you are stranding in the desert from if you go backwards, let's say 1900, you enter a sphere of astrological desert covering 200 years backwards before you find astrology again in somewhere around 1700.
Right.
How did you jump back from there?
The book that got me really seriously interested in traditional astrology, I still think it's the greatest book on astrology in the English language, William Lilly.
Okay, so you sort of got into the fold of Olivia Berkeley, is it isn't it? This English tradition in the 1980s started where the English astrologers started to revive Lilly, and you sort of connected to them.
Well, I connected to Lilly a lot more quickly than I connected with that particular group there.
Oh,
I did
okay.
not find about Olivia Barclay until quite a bit later.
Oh, okay.
In fact, the edition that I have, and the one that I've worked out of the most, is the one that Esther America published, the Dave Roll edition, that he reset everything and such. It's a gorgeous piece of work. Unfortunately, it's still available. And that book, I think, had more of a foundational influence on me than any other book in getting me seriously interested in traditional astrology. And still, a lot of my techniques and system and so on come from Lily.
You mentioned it's not available nowadays?
No, it is. Fortunately, is.
Oh,
The reason
fortunately.
I said unfortunate is available is that it was published by Dave Roll. He died about, it was 4 or 5 years ago, I think. But fortunately, a lot of his books have stayed in print.
Okay. For our German viewers, die christliche Astrologie von William Lilly ist verfügbar beim Astronova Chiron Verlag von Reinhard Stiele. Dort ist es auf Deutsch erschienen. I just said that we have a German edition of Lilly in Germany.
Good, good.
Okay, so Lilly. Now one could say, okay, why didn't you stay with Lilly? Lilly is a good read, he's a good practitioner, he's fun to read, he's fun to do. Why jump back further?
Why should I stop with Lily?
Okay.
No,
okay.
Readers do this. You read a book, it refers to something else. You go dig that up. You read that refers to something else. You dig that up, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And where I got very, very lucky in my interest in traditional astrology, this, by the way, we're talking early 2000s when I was seriously getting into that. This was the period, like when I went down our little local occult bookstore, Magus Books, so I would spend a fair amount of time there. And they had this lovely big hardcover 2-volume set on astrology called Book of Astronomy by Guido Bonatti, translated by Ben Dykes.
Okay.
And I picked that up when it first came up. And as you know, Bonatti is one of the big sources that
1300.
Right, exactly. And it was from that book that I began to become aware of the work that Ben Dykes did, and then some of the translations that he did of the Arabic text from the Latin. They were available when I was first, getting into that. And I was reading his translations. I was reading the wonderful series of translation that James Holden did of people like Abu Ali and so on.
And James Holden has Morand de Villefranche translated.
Right. Yeah, he's one of the, I think, big people in terms of fleshing out the historical awareness.
And he has this rather large volume bibliography of ancient astrologers, of all the astrologers, a thick thing. Okay.
Right. I have it about 3 feet from me here. Yes.
It's right there behind me.
Very nice.
Okay. So now we are with Bonatti. Again, the question, you could stay there. You don't have to go back from that.
Mm-hmm.
It's rather all the information is there. Why go further back in history?
Bonatti's a compilation.
Yes.
And it made sense. Well, I found this one book translated by Ben Dykes. It made sense to pursue other books translated by Ben, which I did.
And you met you met Ben on a conference, didn't you?
Where it's interesting. I first met Ben at a AFA, American Federation of Astrologer conference. I believe that was 2011, 2012, something like that. And that's in Arizona.
Yes.
And that's where I first met Ben, first connected with him, which is interesting because we found out after we got to talking that we live about 10 minutes from each other.
Yes, quite some karma.
Right. And it was seriously. And it was after that we reconnected, and Ben, for at least a couple of years there, became my teacher. So there you've got the logical, rooting in the tradition at that point. There was a period from about 2008 where I first started getting really interested, or about 2015, where I was reading everything I could get my hands on in traditional astrology. spent far too much money.
So now we are talking about Abu Mashar, about Ibn
Right.
Ezra. We are talking about Vityas Valens, Dorotheus, Paulus. Did you start digging into the Platonic philosophy when you read Vityas Valens, or before that?
Before that, just in general, when I became very, very obvious that the roots of our traditional astrology are in Hellenistic civilization.
Yes.
And also, it's extremely obvious to me as a philosophy major that astrology is a total mismatch with the usual modern view of society and cosmos and everything put together. It just plain old doesn't make sense in the modern world. So I'm very interested in what kind of worldview is there that astrology is just a necessary part of the cosmos. That's where my interest in Plato came from. Plato and the Platonist tradition in general, I'm very, very interested in. There's in terms of, in English language, in terms of the overall Platonist tradition, or there's a wonderful publisher in Great Britain named, what is it? It's, I want to say Prometheus Press, but I think it's Prometheus something else. They published and keep in print all of the translations and writings of the British Platonist Thomas Taylor.
You know, we have the same thing in Germany. That's the Meiner Verlag in Hamburg, who has published all the Platonic scriptures.
Right. And I like that you refer to as scriptures, by the way, because part of what's distinguished about Thomas Taylor himself, the translations he did, he himself is was a practicing Platonist. To him, these were indeed scriptures. And it really makes a difference when you read a translation by a scholar who believes in what he's reading.
Yes.
As opposed to a scholar who looks down on these vaguely demented late Platonists with their weird fantasies. You know, it's a very different attitude.
Well, it's the same problem with astrology. We have since the 50s, Neugebauer and followers, we have this academia interest in astrology as a cultural phenomenon, and we have all these publications. I have a book here. It's called The Astrological Autobiography of a Medieval Philosopher, Henry Batin Nativitas, 1280 to 1281, edited by Carlos Steele, Stephen van den Broek, David Houston, Shlomo Sela. These are academic people. And not all of them take astrology serious, but they're working about the history of astrology. So that's the same phenomenon you just mentioned.
Right. It would rather be like buying a copy of the Bible translated by a Marxist atheist.
Yeah, well, but on the other hand, they are helpful for us astrologers because for example, in Munich, in the Ludwig Maximilian University, there is this 25-year research project of Ptolemy scriptures, and they're digging up all the Latin scriptures of Ptolemy. The Greek are already available. So we have to be thankful that they translate these stuff, so we can read it from a different point of view.
Yes, I agree. No, it's wonderful that it's available.
Well, for example, in 2019, 2 years from now, backwards, we have this translation of the Great Introduction into Astrology by Abu Mashar, by Yamamoto and Burnett. We wouldn't have this sort of translation. Then we would only have Robert Zoller and Schmidt and Robert Hand and Benjamin Dykes. But now we have a lot of academic people all over the world. In Germany, it's Just, it's Stefan Heilen in Osnabrück, it's Hübner in Münster. So we have a lot of people publishing texts we are interested. So that's good.
Yeah, it's a good thing. And I'm hoping that there's more of a tendency with academic translators to translate astrology texts and take astrology seriously.
Well, that happens.
To know enough about it that they can technically understand what they're talking about.
Well, that happens quite a bit. I did a video with Helena Avena from Portugal, and and they have an Astra project. They are interviewing academic researchers, and you can find that there are quite some people who have this respect for of astrology. And then you
Good.
have Charles Burnett, the senior researcher in the world in the London Warburg Institute, and he's sort of half an astrologer nowadays.
Okay.
So we have that, and I
good.
recommend very much to go to YouTube and search for Astra, ASTRA, Astra project, and you find all those interviews. And they did an interview with Dorian Gisela Greenbaum,
I'm
and
familiar with her work.
she
Yeah.
did a dissertation on the Daimon at the Warburg Institute, and Helena did a dissertation, and her husband did a dissertation in the Warburg Institute, and all three of them are practicing astrologers. So there is a mix there.
Yeah, and yeah, I was aware that Greenbaum was practicing astrology. I have her book on temperament.
Oh, you don't have a Daimon book?
No, I do not.
Oh, well, it's very expensive. That's why.
Yes,
I can't afford. I can't afford to pay 260 euros for a book of that kind.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I could get it. I could get it by the we call this long distance lending. Do you have that in America? Long distance lending?
Yeah, we do. You mean basically interlibrary loan? Yes.
Yes.
We have
Yes.
that. Yes.
So I got the Daimon book from Mrs. Greenbaum and read it for 4 weeks, and then I had to give it back. Okay. So now we are closing in on how you started. You read all these old texts, and then you've realized that Plato's philosophy and Plato's worldview and Plato's conviction had something to do with what you were doing as an astrologer. How did that start?
One of the main things is, and this is getting into talking about Socrates and so on, is that it's very, very obvious that in Greek philosophy, the gods are alive and well and are a living part of the structure of the cosmos. In fact, the cosmos doesn't make sense without them. Well, astrology doesn't make sense without that particular structure. Saturn's not a rock in the sky. Saturn is, if you will, the outermost, I'll call it reflection on our particular plane of, there we go. I need to take the presence of the gods seriously in the dialogues of Plato. That it was very obvious reading fairly widely in Plato's dialogues, especially in Taylor's translations, and Plato's dialogues in the context of the overall Platonist tradition, that the Greek tradition, the Platonic tradition, is polytheist. It's multiple gods, you know?
Yes.
And there's been a real, as far as I could tell, in academic views of Plato until fairly recently, there seems to be a very, very strong prejudice to want to turn Plato into a closet monotheist. Because it matches, pardon? Oh, he's very definitely. Oh, he's absolutely, definitely not. And you can't just explain away his reference to the gods in all his dialogues and with how it was used by the whole Platonist tradition.
When I read your article, which is on the screen right now, I realized that you live this, that you not only do philosophy about it. You said you have a major in philosophy. Where did you get that?
McAllister College in early 1970s. That's where I got started in interest.
And I recommend our viewers to read the whole article. We will not produce the whole article today, just pieces of it. But if you read the whole article, you will realize that Charlie is not a philosopher about Plato's worldview, but he is, how shall I frame this? You are living this.
Yes, this stuff's alive to me.
Okay, tell us how you do it. Tell us how you do that.
Well, see, it's kind of the point where I've been studying this stuff enough that I look at the world more through these eyes. So that, like for a modern astrologer, not all of modern astrology, but the overwhelming amount of it, astrology is basically psychological. It's all inside the psyche, all inside the head. So there's a strong links between like astrology and the Jungian archetypes, astrology and dream symbolism, etc. Now that's all there, But for me, astrology isn't just in my head. Okay. Like just, things that I notice in terms of, planets are alive. There was a day this winter that I was going out to check my mail, and I started opening my front door and the lock broke. I couldn't get the door open. And I jotted down the time, which astrologers do, and I had to call a locksmith. And I noticed that looking at the chart, right when my door broke, Saturn was right on the ascendant at that point. Next day, I called the locksmith, jotted down the time when the locksmith showed up, and I checked that particular time, and Mercury was right on the ascendant when the locksmith came up to, open up the lock. So Saturn broke my door, and Mercury came by to fix it.
Okay, let's dive into that.
This is not psychological. It's wired into external events.
Let's dive more into that. You are bordering on the anima mundi of the romantic scribants. Everything is a living entity. The whole universe is a living entity. And then in your article, you were writing about the hierarchy of these living entities.
Right.
So do you connect with the different entities by sort of astrological magic, for example?
I have. I don't do a lot of work with that now.
Okay.
Part of what I love about the Platonic system is not just this is all alive, but it's a hierarchy linking to what Plato called the source or the one or the good, from which all this, if you will, comes. And for me, this whole astrology in general, and life in particular, only makes sense with this hierarchy, because it's an overall structure of the universe.
Are you talking about the ladder of the angels from Dionysius Areopagita?
Yes. Well, you're probably aware that Dionysius was likely a student of Proclus.
Okay.
And at least there's good reason to say that at least one of Dionysius' texts, I believe the one called The Divine Hierarchy, was a text originally written by Proclus. So it's like the different layers of gods and demons, etc., in the Greek pantheon got smuggled into the Christian tradition as the angels and the archangels and the principalities and powers and thrones, etc. It's the same system.
Okay. I still have a little problem to differentiate. We are talking in sort of terms of philosophy.
Okay.
But that's not what you mean. You are not a philosopher. You are part of the system. You belong to it, right?
Okay, well, we're using philosophy, the word philosophy in different senses here. I use philosophy closer to the original sense of being the love of wisdom and the search for the wisdom in the world. So for me, it's a living discipline. It's not something theoretical I do with language and concepts. It's a search for the truth. Okay.
But how do you encounter in your everyday life the reality of the gods?
By paying attention. The underlying assumption of astrology is it's the as above, so below. It's that we have a structured cosmos. And everything going on with the cosmos as a whole is mirrored in our individual lives. Okay. And part of what astrology gives us is it's a language that translates that particular order in a way that we can understand it. So the patterns that I see in astrology, not just within me, but around me, makes sense of my world, makes sense what's going on in my world, makes where it fits into the rest of the world, etc. It's a living order that I'm in the middle of.
That brings you to the problem to find an answer to the question, how much and where is free will in that system?
That's a levels of consciousness thing there. And I think where that, by the way, that's an extremely wide topic, obviously. Where I understand it now is that we're multi-level beings, okay? And in terms of the effects of the planets of astrology, part of us, if you will, is under the planets. There is a part of us that, I don't know if I want to say transcends, it's not quite the right word, but there's a level that is in our consciousness that we can perceive the order of the cosmos and choose how to act. So free will is something that, if you will, it's vertical, not horizontal dimension.
And there is a rather large video on the Astrology podcast from Chris Brennan with a colleague of his, and they were talking 3 hours about astrological magic and free will. And he said that there is a different layer. There is something is fated, something is not, and it's not so easy to differentiate it. That's your position too, right?
Okay. I don't even know if I'd phrase it quite like that. First of all, I'm going to take the words fate and providence. There's different ways of viewing the same thing. If you're just are on a material causal level, you could view everything as being fated. But see, it's part of the, and this is argued in the Platonic tradition also, that the fact that there is divine providence and divine foreknowledge does not mean that things does not negate free will, because the system includes free will as part of it.
Especially if you consider the fact what's in your article is the situation of Socrates in his Apologia, and there is a part of that system we are living in is the part before birth, right? Could you tell the story?
You mean about how that fits within
the myth of Eris, I think.
Right, the myth of Air, which is in book 10.
Yes,
of the Republic. That's interesting. Now, as to how literal Plato took this, that's a whole other issue. But as this pointing to something, yeah. And the way it is in that story there is prior to an incarnation, essentially, the gods of the fates cast lots and let people, you choose your lot in life. And there's kind of a pecking order, like in the lottery, here's, which you can take. And whatever life you choose, then the overall parameters of that life are already determined. What is not determined is how you deal with it.
Yes.
So the big choice of life in some ways takes place before we even get here. The overall pattern's already chosen.
Which changes the point of view free will, because then before your incarnation you had free will, sort of, and that free will is no longer necessary after you start living your voluntary life.
There's free will in different ways here, but yeah. I get what you're saying about that. But also, this is a place where this Platonic view we're talking about and the modern view is very, very different, because, as you know, modern astrology very, very heavily emphasizes free will and views essentially the life, that a person comes into. This is all potential. I can do whatever I want with it.
Yes.
That it's like the world out there is, and the future is this unformed stuff that I impose my will on. That's not the traditional view at all. The traditional view is I am born into an order that I fit within, rather than my imposing an order on it. It's a profoundly different way of thinking about the world.
It sort of borders on the Stoic philosophy, right?
That's part of it. The Stoic is part of that, I'll call them complex of philosophies that had influence on Western astrology, just on our Western world in general. The Platonic philosophy is part of it. The Stoic philosophy is part of it. You have Aristotle, who I view as being part of the overall Platonic tradition. And then that interacted with the Judeo tradition And you have the synthesis of that through late Jewish writers like Philo of Alexandria, and then a kind of a synthesis with that in the whole Christian worldview.
So if you take this as a reality, now we take the desktop again.
Okay.
We go back to the intermediate levels. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. This, by the way, is in the Platonic worldview. It's also in the Christian worldview. If you think of the source of the source of the universe as being what Plato referred to as the one and the good, okay? And then there's us here on Earth. Well, there's so much difference and so much of a gap in quality and all kinds of things between the one and the good. How do you explain the connection between the two? And in the fully developed Platonic system, which you see in the late Platonists, especially Proclus, who goes into this in just painful detail, the only way you can have a connection like that is there have to be the intermediate grades that serve as the connecting link there. So there's higher level gods and level gods below them and level gods below them, etc. Our connection to the gods is part of a chain that connects us to the source.
Okay. So back to the article.
Okay.
No, that was this one.
Mm-hmm.
Chain of the Gods you just mentioned.
Right. Chain of the Gods is what I just mentioned exactly. And as I mentioned, you see that fully developed in Proclus and Iamblichus.
At the top level are the highest gods.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, when I read those texts, those ancient texts, there is sort of a differentiation. There is the planets as one of these higher gods, and then later on a lower level, the planets reappear on the lower level as demons.
Right.
Do you go along with that?
The gods exist on multiple levels. Yeah.
And the planets are on multiple levels too, right?
Right. And I would put the planets as we experience them are not at the highest level. We're getting fairly low down because we're in material reality here. Yeah.
So these would be the demonic levels of planets, right?
Yes, exactly. And by the way, those phrases of gods, demons, heroes, that is Proclus's terminology.
Okay.
Or Proclus uses that, Iamblichus uses that.
Okay, that goes, now we are going to the demon, our theme of our episode today. Right. The demon is our connection to the divine chain.
Right.
Talk about your personal demon.
Well, first I'm going to talk about this in both the Platonic and I'm going to talk about in the Christian sense because I think they're related. In the myth of air, every person on life is assigned a guardian demon. And by the way, we chatted a little bit about beforehand. In Greek, there's one word. You sometimes see it pronounced daimon.
In Germany, we say daimon, not demon.
Right. And a lot of, especially pagans here, will say daimon in order to differentiate this from demons, because daimons are good and demons are evil.
Yeah.
It's a single word in the Greek.
In Germany, we have an advantage over the English language. We have the term genius, which is not genius, and genius is exactly the same like daimon with no evil connotation.
Okay.
So for the German viewers, we're talking about genius.
Right. See, and in actually, that is close to an older connotation of the word genius in English.
Yes.
That a genius is like a presiding deity rather than.
Yes, yes. Right? That's the same. That's what we call genius.
And within the Christian system, you have the equivalent concept of every person having a guardian angel. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Or I think it's the same thing.
And how do you experience your genius?
Well, I think of, in my own prayer life, I think I don't pray to my genius. I don't pray to my guardian angel. I pray to the highest. But I think the highest gets at me through my guardian angel, if you will.
And how does he do that? Some examples. I believe you mentioned one of the examples with writing a book, right?
Yeah. And also I am a writer, and writers often get this, that a lot of the most important writing I do is stuff that I'll be lying in bed. It's around 2:33 in the morning, and I get this really insistent voice in bed nagging me and say, "Get up, you got something you need to write about." And I quick, jot down, but it's like a inner compulsion's not quite the right word, but something like this. Hi, you need to pursue this direction. You need to write about this, and so on. I will also sometimes, this could be a two-way process where, like, before I go to bed, I'll think about, gee, I'd love to have an idea, what should I do next in this particular area? And same thing around 3 and 4 in the morning. Okay, dude, get to work on this.
Yes, I know that. The project Astro Talk, there is a special homepage about that, was in 4:03 in the morning, and I took down the time.
Exactly. And the feeling is like, it's like I write the books on demand. Okay, here's the one we want you to work on next.
Yes.
And I'll call them the serious writers that I know, the people writing's kind of their vocation. There's the illusion, if you're not a writer, that we write about whatever we want. No, we write about what we have to write about. That's what it feels like internally.
Did you experience sort of occult phenomena when you did writing those books, or was that all occult about it?
As in, actual dictation?
That would be the furthest part of it,
Okay.
yes.
I think it goes on all the time. Where does normal phenomena end and occult begin?
Yeah, okay.
Because one of the things I am increasingly convinced of, for good and bad both, is, and this is part of what this whole chain of beings implies, our minds are open not just on the outside, but on their inside. And we are constantly influenced by other intelligences. They most commonly, if you will, get at us through our own thoughts. You see? This is both a very beautiful thing and it's kind of a scary thing, because just because something is incarnate doesn't mean it's good.
Sure.
Doesn't mean that
there is evil in the world, no question.
Oh, absolutely. So part of the awareness that, hey, we're open on the inside. This means we're open to guidance. This means we're open to influence. But this also means that we have the responsibility to choose what we respond to. And this is where Socrates and his demon, I think, tie in there, because this is an example of a, I'll call it a high-level demon who always seemed to manifest in a good way. But this is partly the quality of Socrates as the man, that he had this very high level of, if you will, moral integrity. So that was the sort of demon that he was open to influence.
Are you familiar with the work of Rupert Sheldrake and his morphogenetic fields?
A little bit, not a great deal. I read, what was the first book he wrote? A new something model of life or something like that. Read years and years and years ago. Yes.
So these morphogenetic fields, they have to fit into our worldview, right?
Right.
Is that the lowest level of the daimonic hierarchy?
It could be a modern way of getting at it. Okay. A modern model for thinking about it.
Okay. Now let's go back to the article.
Okay.
For our viewers, the mythos of air is in Plato's Republic at the end of the Republic. Right. Okay, we had that.
By the way, I have a separate article just on the myth of air out on this.
Yes. And I killed my prepared thing. That's always, we still in retrograde Mercury, right?
No, it just went direct, I think about a day and a half, 2 days
Oh,
ago.
okay. Now we're going down in the article to the astrology, the Daimon in astrology. How did you come about the Daimon in astrology? That is not so specifically written in Plato, right?
Right. Well, the if the concept of each person having a guardian daimon, I think I'm not completely thought out that, but I think there is a connection in our astrology with the kind of daimon we tend to resonate to. Like the older I get, the more it's fairly obviously that there is a, oh yeah, and if you will, chains of gods here, it's by the time you got to our diamond here, that diamond is under a particular god and has a particular flavor. My diamond's a very Saturn flavored diamond.
Okay.
That would be the, my link, if you will.
So now we are in the field of astrology and the diamonds.
Right. So there is, isn't there, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't researched this thoroughly. Isn't there at least some part of the tradition where they talk about basically how to discover the nature of your diamond from your chart?
I don't know.
I recall running into that. I haven't researched it thoroughly, but I believe I've run into that.
So we have this citation I was talking earlier. The planetary gods of astrology are themselves demons in the sense of being intermediate gods.
Right.
And the physical planet we see is just the outermost garment or layer of a higher level of intelligence. When I was doing pro bono work in astrology, I said to the clients, for example, there was an aspect with Saturn. I said there's an example in the books of Thorvald Detlefsen, which might be even translated into English, and he said in his book Fate as Chance, if you have a Saturn problem, you have a choice. You can open the doors for the Saturn energy and the Saturn quality and the Saturn God, and you can bring him goods. I don't know the English word. How do you
sacrifice? Is that
sacrifice? And or you could negate the influence, and then the Saturn comes and gives you by an accident, and then you land in the hospital, and then you have a Saturnian experience in the hospital bed, right? That's your view too, right? To do sacrifices for the actual energy of the gods.
You could. I always try to work with the highest, just where I'm at now, but I think that particular view is perfectly valid. And I know very good astrologers who do exactly that. In fact, who do, if you will, remedial astrology, that if you're dealing with a, say, a Saturn issue, that's a Saturn problem, you might do a Saturn ritual, or you might do a Saturn, like she uses Sanskrit, you might do a Saturn mantram or something like that. Let me kind of give an overall shape here, okay? Because when I do a reading, I assume that I said there's an overall order to the cosmos, and all the astrology is part of that order, right? I assume that that reading and that person's chart and what's going on right here and right now is part of that overall order, that they fit within it. And part of that order includes a dimension that I would call divine providence, a care for us, okay? And my job is to attempt to, how do I want to put this?
To
help
connect,
the client align to divine providence, if you will.
To connect with it, right?
Yes, and to be aware of it, to consciously be aware of it. And there's very explicit precedent for that sort of approach to astrology and a session there. And Guido Bonatti, the section that's, what's it called? I think the 146 considerations, something like that.
Yes.
One of the main things he emphasizes in the first part of that, and Lily picks this up and runs with it, is basically make sure the person is getting a reading for the right reason. And part of what they're doing is essentially face for a real need with what I guess you could call divine guidance. And some of the conditions before reading in astrology were basically ways of filtering out to make sure that this is a real reading. This isn't someone that's just here to test the astrologer, it's just kind of curious, but that they're really here because of a need. That makes an awful lot of sense to me.
Yes. Do you make, when you're with a client, does it sometimes happen that you do an invocation of specific planetary energy?
No, not as part of the session itself. But what I always do, well, I pray. What I always do before the session is if you will pray, which is basically divine alignment. That okay, I'm here for a reason.
Yes, yes.
And help me to align with that. I always do that beforehand, partially because I don't know where my client's coming from in terms of that. You see?
Yes.
So I always do that as my preparation on my side, because I don't know what the client's bringing to the session in terms of how they think of the universal order or deity or anything.
That brings us more into the field of the technique of astrology. There is a technique where the Daimon comes into the chart. It's called the lot of Daimon.
Yes.
And you have published a book about the lots.
Yeah, actually, the book on the lots, I should mention, by the way, that I am covering just two of the lots.
Yeah, the most important ones.
And the lot of spirit, which is also called the lot of the Daimon. Yeah.
For our viewers, this is the book.
Right.
The lots of fortune and spirit. Spirit is a bad translation of Daimon.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Mrs. Greenbaum, writing her dissertation about the astrological Daimon, is making marketing not to use the term spirit, but to use this term lot of Daimon. Okay. And tell us about the book.
Okay, well, what I wanted to do with that is I wanted to figure out what those two lots meant. Okay. By the way, I should mention that of all the books that I've done, this is the one book that intersects a fair amount with some modern astrology. Okay. And for me, the meaning of those two main lots, all of the lots, but those two especially, it's a particular geometrical configuration. And basically what those two lots are doing is forming a geometrical configuration that connects with, and if you will, lights up the ascendant, the sun, and the moon.
I can show this on my own chart.
If you, by the way, go ahead.
If you go in my classical chart, you can see my fortune lot is here, and the geometrical part on the other side would be here. That is the lot of Daimon.
Right. They're always symmetrically on either side of the ascendant, the same distance, one above, one below. Now, while you're there, these particular configuration, and I got on the cover of my book there, if you took with your mouse pointer, your finger, and you drew a line from the lot up to the moon, and then over to the ascendant, and then over to the sun, and back to the moon. I'm sorry, back to spirit, fortune, my mistake. So fortune to moon to ascendant to sun to fortune.
Yes.
Right, you're tracing a four-sided figure there.
Yes.
What?
A geometrical figure.
Right, a isosceles trapezoid. Dave Cochran's nickname for it was an isotrap. And in every chart, those 4 points, the lot of fortune, sun, ascendant, and the moon will form an isosceles trapezoid. And the lot of spirit will form a second isosceles trapezoid. And there's something about that configuration in terms of the number of equal aspects and the number of midpoints and so on, that when the lot of fortune is, if you will, turned on, it simultaneously triggers and integrates the sun and the ascendant and the moon, which are three of the most important points in the entire chart.
Yes.
So the lots serve as like integration points and trigger points.
You were mentioning techniques from the Uranian school, the Hamburg school
Correct.
in Germany.
That's correct.
You use the Hamburg Uranian school methods with what do you use of them in your traditional astrology?
Well, first of all, I don't work them as much as I did. There was a period I worked them quite intently. The geometry of it, I use the 90 degree dial quite a bit. I'm pretty familiar with that, and midpoints. And where I first got interested in Uranian astrology is all of the lots have a particular mathematical formula.
Yes.
Well, if you look at the formula of what Iranian astrology calls their planetary pictures, it's not just similar, it's identical.
Yes.
It's exactly the same formula. They're dealing with the same thing, coming at it from a different language. That's where I decided I wanted to check out Iranian. And that book on the lots is my one book that is integrating the two.
And how about Antistia?
That's a different, it's related, but it's a different geometry.
Do you use it?
I use it some. I don't use it all that extensively.
And that brings me to my next question. You have an article on your journal, on your homepage, about complexity. And you are discussing the problems of modern astrology.
Yep.
With all these asteroids and Chiron and Vertex and whatever there is available. The article is here. It's astrological complexity.
Right.
Okay, let's have a look at the complexity of my chart, which is really complex in comparison. This is my Placidus modern astrology chart. That's complex. I agree with you. But
and by the way, am I right? You're also, there's major and minor aspects there.
Yes,
also.
yes, Kepler aspects as well.
They're very minor.
But if you look at this, we have only the lot of fortune, and the lot of Daimon isn't even put in. But you do know that the lot technique is not just two lots.
Right.
The ancients, Hellenistic people had something like 97 surrounded lots, and the Arabics, they did a little more. They had about 150 lots, and if you put all those lots in that horoscope, in that chart, that complexity, in one of your videos, you were talking about Hellenistic astrology and traditional astrology, and you were talking about in a short sentence how complex traditional astrology is. I agree with your article about the complexity problems in modern astrology, but would you agree that the complexity of traditional astrology is 10 times more complex than modern astrology? If you use all the techniques, decans and terms and triplicities and dignities and all that.
That's the magic phrase. If you use all the techniques, like the lots, I really don't think they were intended to be every time you do a chart, look at all 250 or however many lots.
Yes.
I mean, for most of the time, if your average, client comes to you, you're not going to be too worried about the lot of barley harvest or the lot of lentils. Okay. And there are lots to those. The lots were designed to answer specific questions.
On a third level.
Right. So you would, right. And that's a difference I've noticed in like traditional, and even me when I use them, that I view the 7 main planets as primary. They're the most important thing in the chart. That plus the main angles, everything else is secondary. Okay. So even when I look at a chart with the 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, I don't look at it the same way as a modern do. I see the 7 main planets and then these 3 supporting planets. Same thing. I've done some looking in asteroids. Asteroids are, again, it's at another level down. It's another supplemental level. They're nowhere near as important as the traditional 7. Well, what I find with modern astrologers that use the outer planets and all the asteroids, they don't distinguish in terms of level as important.
Yes.
So you could like put a chart there and you've got like, Saturn sitting on the ascendant, and Saturn is in mutual reception with Mars, and they're making an applying square. And a modern astrologer might look at it and go, ooh, you've got Vesta in the second. And that
Yes.
becomes,
Yes.
you see what I mean? It becomes the focus. That to me is a lack of prioritization of importance. I think these 7 traditional planets are the most important points. And if you do pay attention to any of the outer points, they are not as important and they're supplementary. So now like my preferred way now is if I teach traditional astrology, I would say, cut out the 3 modern planets, cut out the asteroids, learn the basic 7, get those wired in as the core. Then you're ready to add things.
And you have a book published about this.
On the Planet Anthology.
Yeah, not only that. The book is called, let's go to your book.
Are you talking about the planets one or the Saturn one?
No, neither. I'm talking about, let's go to Charles Obert. I'm talking about introduction, about this one.
Oh, yeah, that's the first book I wrote, yeah. And I do mention the outer planets there, but I concentrate on the inner 7.
And that brings me to my next question. This is an introductory book for traditional natal astrology.
Right.
You have this strange word, genetliology. How do you pronounce that in English?
Not sure. I think you came about as close as I could.
Okay. Okay, we're talking about planets. That's obvious. But then the next level, dignities, is always with you, is always mandatory, right?
Oh, absolutely. To me, the system of dignities and debilities, it's at the core of our astrology, because in essence of reading astrology chart is figuring out the condition of the planets. Are they in good shape? Are they in bad shape? Are they likely to perform well? Are they likely to perform poorly? Are they going to help you? Or are they going to hurt you? The using dignities in astrology, I touch on that in my first book, The Intro. I developed it further in that book. And that book is the book, by the way, that I teach my course at one of the 2 classes I teach at Kepler is on dignities.
Let's go a little bit off topic. Kepler College, for the European viewers, could you talk a little bit about what you're doing there and what Kepler College is?
Kepler College is a training school, I would call it, to produce well-balanced, intelligent, well-trained astrologers. They are not a certified college. You cannot get a certified degree from them.
They have been a couple of years from 2000.
Right.
You could do a bachelor, master, and a doctoral thesis, but you can't do that nowadays.
Correct.
Okay.
As to why that happened, I don't know. I by the way, became involved with Kepler I think it's about 6 years ago now.
Yeah, that's after this period where they could, where they were accredited.
They have a degree program, training in astrology, some for required basic courses, and different areas of astrology you could specialize in, traditional or psychological or whatever. My class on the dignities, and there's another class I do on traditional predictive, I view as being the dignities would be like, this is a really important, you want to take this shortly after the intro class, because to me, it's at the core of doing any astrology. It really, really is.
Okay, so we have the planets, we have the dignities. How about the triplicities? Mandatory, or you could leave it out?
I always look at all the dignities. We're talking the major and the minor.
Yes.
The major being rulership and exaltation. I use all 5 of the dignities.
Okay, so we have the planets, we have the dignities. How about the decans? Mandatory?
You're talking about the decanates or the faces?
Yes.
In terms of the dignity system, they're a minor part. I don't use them all that heavily myself, but it's another part of the tradition that an awful lot was done with dividing these signs up into threes and talking about the characteristics of the three parts.
Okay.
So our tradition by now is part of it is it's not a single tradition, that it's a combination of all sorts of threads that were integrated into an overall system. And one of the things you have to choose as an astrologer is which techniques do I use as my basic part and which do I not use? Like a lot of I've seen astrologers online who swear by, I believe the words dodecatemoria, the 12th parts, dividing the signs up into 12 with each having its own zodiac sign. They swear by that about how central it is. This is a level of detail beyond what I want to get to.
Okay.
So part of practicing is choosing which techniques am I going to pursue and which am I going to leave. There's more techniques than any one astrologer could do.
From your way of delineating the lot of fortune and the lot of Daimon, I suppose I'm correct in the presupposition that you have to differentiate the sects, right?
That's one of the things I was studying in my book. I wanted to look at specific examples of how it played out in different charts to see if I could find number one, a consistent difference in meaning between the two lots. And number two, could I find a consistent meaning as to how it worked out for saying you should always do the lots with a single formula, or you should change the formula for calculating the lots in a day chart and a night chart?
Well, you do that with the planets. If you follow the sect philosophy, the malefic and the benefic changes their delineation quality if it's a diurnal or a nocturnal chart.
And I do pay attention to that.
Oh, you do that?
In terms of the lot, no, I pay attention to sect.
Yes, okay.
And no, I know that for a fact about, like, Saturn is a lot more malefic in a night chart and a day chart.
So you do use the sect approach.
Oh, okay. God, yeah. Hey, talk to people about Saturn returns, and you could pretty put money on the fact that if you've got a night chart, your Saturn return is going to be way worse than if you have a day chart.
But you do realize that the ancients, like Vettius Valens, they did calculate the different formulas according to sects, and you don't?
No, I guess the way I would say it is I always calculate both fortune and spirit or diamond or whatever you want to call it. And then what I'm looking at is not so much what's the difference meaning between the two, but when and how are those points getting triggered? And when they do get triggered, that's when I look at the geometry of the whole chart. But what I found in terms of looking at, like, when they are conjunct a natal planet or they experience a Saturn transit or something like that, I could not find a consistent difference in meaning between the two lots. So I view them as a pair. And that's, by the way, pretty much the only lots I use. And I realize that I depart from the tradition in doing that. But in terms of studying how they actually worked out in natal charts and in transits, that's what I found. Both of those charts light up the ascendant, sun, and moon. That's the critical part.
So basically you are saying in the chart I showed before, in my chart, the one is in Pisces, and the other one, let's get rid of this, and that was this one. So basically you are saying we have the lot of fortune here and we have the lot of diamond here, and basically you are saying if there is something transiting either here or here, that lights up the whole thing, and it doesn't matter whether it's a diurnal or a nocturnal. In my case, it's a nocturnal chart. That doesn't matter in your experience.
Well, what I would do then is when it lights it up in your chart, I'd look at, okay, like, your lot of fortune. Your lot of fortune is in Pisces. The ruler of Pisces is over in Aquarius. It's averse. let's see, where's the exalted, where you got Venus? Oh, Venus is next to Jupiter, kind of the two rulers of the lots of that one lot are reverse. Okay.
Yeah.
And I would pay attention to that. And the planet that I look at most often, this is one that I just, whenever this happens, I pay attention. When Saturn hits a lot, pay attention. This is going to be a really intense and important period in your life.
And to get this right, you watched it closely and you haven't found a difference whether Saturn was here on the Daimon or was here on the fortune. And by the way, do you only use conjunctions or do you use other aspects as well? Transit things.
Conjunctions are the most consistently important.
Okay.
Because it's like a conjunction completes the circuit, is the way I would put it. Okay.
Yeah.
If you have something like a square or an opposition, then that lot, if you will, the circuit gets completed and that hard aspect gets triggered when some other point triggers that. Well, if nothing else, the moon's going to trigger each of the lots once a month.
Yeah, but by the way, if you have an opposition for the lot of fortune, that would be on the lot of Daimon, right?
Not always.
Well, if it's 180 degrees.
No, that would only be, in your case, it is because your lot of fortune is very near a hard square from your ascendant.
Oh, okay, I understand, yeah.
The lot of fortune and the lot of spirit are always the same distance from the ascendant on opposite sides.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree.
It's in your chart that particular thing's happening.
Yeah, okay. So basically you're saying, okay, conjunctions always, oppositions sometimes, sometimes not?
Or the oppositions or squares for like a slow moving planet like Saturn would be important, but not as powerfully, so a bit more erratically, if you will, because it's like the circuit is only intermittently being turned on when the planet is actually on the lot. Okay. That I found pretty consistent. What I did is took several people that I took their charts and then interviewed them, and I did a chart of just transits to the lots, especially Saturn and Jupiter. And then we talked about, okay, when Saturn hit your lot of fortune, let's talk about that period of your life. When Saturn hit a lot of spirit, let's talk about that period of your life. And that the kinds of events that happened to them and how difficult or fortunate or whatever they were had a lot to do with where was the lot, where was the ruler of the lot, what kind of other configurations were to the lot, and so on. So the lot turned on potential.
So considering the fact that you don't change the formulas for diurnal and nocturnal charts, does that mean in your practice that you basically only use one formula and that's it?
Well, think about those two. The lot of fortune and the lot of spirit are always...
They're symmetrical, yeah.
Right, exactly. And one of them, so like if you had a day chart, the lot of fortune, you'd have lot of fortune for day, and then the change of that would be spirit, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, the only thing that's going on is if you got a night chart is that the two lots change names.
And the chart itself changes its quality.
Right, the chart itself does indeed change its quality, but I've got the same 2 points.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'll come up with the same 2 points whether I use day or night chart calculating.
Yeah, but now, the interrelation in the chart, the transit of Saturn, let's say on the Daimon, if you use only one formula, doesn't that mean that the delineation gets a little bit scrambled because you are not exactly with the formula?
No, the formula in terms of the 2 points is the same.
Yeah, that's right. But the interaction with the rest of the chart is different.
Right, exactly. And what I look at it at that point is this point, what other planets are configuring the lot, where's the ruler of that? And I pay attention to whether those are matching or out of sect in the chart and so on.
But then as soon as you start arguing with yourself, you are using the sect philosophy, right?
Yeah, absolutely is sect.
So why not being consequent and doing the different formulas according to the sect philosophy?
I view the two lots as essentially complementary and equivalent. I'm coming up with the same 2 points.
Okay.
When I calculate them on the chart, always in the program, I put in modify for day and night chart. That's because I'm a traditional astrologer.
Okay.
But effectively, I've got the same 2 points.
But basically what you're saying is when you present the chart to the client, it will be according to sect formula.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
basically we had a theoretical discussion, but because in practice you use a chart according to the theory and the technique,
Right.
and you put in diurnal or nocturnal, and then the formula is automatically created.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
Now,
I only pay attention to the lots either if the client has a natal planet conjunct it, in which case that natal planet serves as sort of an integration point for the person, or if there's a major planet, especially of Jupiter or Saturn, to the lot. Saturn being far more important. Like if the single thing I would take out of that whole book, if you're going to pay attention to anything else, pay attention to conjunction transits of Saturn to either fortune or spirit.
oh, it's basically a Saturn theme for you.
Mostly. I mean, I'll notice other planets, but if Saturn hits one of those two, I sit up and take notice because that's a major period. That's very predictable, very consistent.
So if Jupiter comes along on the Daimon, doesn't interest you?
No, it does indeed. Just it's not going to be either as consistently as important or for as sustained a period of time, just because Jupiter moves so much quicker.
So that would mean the quickest, like Mercury, not really important.
That would be, if you will, it would be like a quick trigger. Now, what I might pay attention to is, say, something like if I've got, say, Mercury conjunct one of the lots in the solar return.
Yeah.
Then that highlights Mercury's importance for that particular.
For the year, yeah. Okay.
So there I pay attention to it, yeah.
Okay, now, considering the situation with your clients, do you bring the big picture of the gods and the living entities we were talking beforehand? Do you bring that into the consultation, or do you check whether the client is already on your Platonic side, and if not, you leave that out?
Okay, do I explicitly talk about it? No.
Okay.
Do I assume? I assume they're there for a reason. And I assume that there is, if you will, the universe is trying to get a message through to them. Okay, and you can think of that in terms of the Daimons or whatever communicating. My job is to figure out what that is. In other words, they're there for a reason. This is not random. It makes sense in their life. And it also, I assume that, if you will, they've got exactly the chart that they need for right here and right now at this point in time to go in the direction they need to go. That it's not, oh, there's these horrible things. This is just bad luck. You're getting hit on all this stuff from the outside. No, this is part of your life pattern. This is happening for a reason. There is a meaning for this.
Okay.
And I find with many, many people that part of what they need from a reading, it's not just tell me what's going to happen, but help me make sense of what's going on with me here. Help me make sense of this in terms of the overall pattern of my life, what it means, what I'm trying to accomplish from this, what I'm trying to learn with it, how I can work with it, and so on. I assume this pattern has meaning to us. It's not just a meaning that we imprint on a meaningless universe. The universe itself has a meaning and structure and order. I assume that. And I don't need to mention Daimon. I don't need to mention God. I don't need to mention intermediate gods. I could talk about, let's figure out how this makes sense to you.
When you talking with your clients, more or less you realize on what philosophical background they are with you. What would you guess? How many of them are on the Platonic side? Planets as living entities. 2%?
I would guess very few have really explicitly thought it out.
Oh, okay.
The way I think of it is, I think most modern people who are interested in astrology think of it as a way that I would call superstitious.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there's a black cat on your front porch. You've got 7 years of bad luck. It's kind of at that level.
Okay.
You know? It's part of one of the areas of interest to me, actually, is that I really think it is important, if you do much at all with astrology, to really think through, how does astrology make sense? How do I think about in terms of the overall cosmos in a living way now, where I can go, yeah, astrology is a logical and even necessary part of the structure of the world I live in. It's not, well, there's this scientific worldview and astrology works and we have no idea why, but I'll keep using it. And meanwhile, I'll make sure there's not a black cat on my front porch.
Well, it's like the homeopathic medicine. They don't know why it works, but it works. Basically,
And
same
I
approach.
think that the, if you will, pattern of intelligence that makes homeopathic medicine work is related to the pattern of intelligence that makes astrology work.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Hahnemann was writing about the force of the spirit.
You could put it that way.
Paragraph 6 of the Organon, yes.
Yes, and that it's.
He basically was saying the daimon, the force of the daimon is doing the trick in his Organon. Strange thing.
That's the way you could talk about it, right? And the Daimon's around and doing his thing, whether I specifically refer to him or her it or not.
That's true.
Yeah.
We are nearing to the end of this wonderful interview and talk about the Daimon in astrology. You are doing nativities in your client work.
Right.
What else of the 4 fields do you do mundane astrology?
Mundane, I don't do a great deal with, partially because it's its own field.
So you don't do that. How about orrery?
Orrery, I do some orrery. Right.
Elections?
Yeah, I've done some elections. And it's interesting because actually I think natal astrology, people view horary and electional as being more advanced. I think it's the other way around.
Yeah, okay.
I think natal astrology is much more complex because you have the whole factor of development through time. A horary is a point in time.
Yeah, that's true.
An event chart. So like I'll say like the concept of peregrine, where a planet has no essential dignities. Okay.
Yes.
In straight horary, a peregrine planet's essentially useless.
Okay.
It can't perform in any way. A peregrine planet in a natal chart, through time, it can turn into an asset because there can be a development in terms of how the person's use it. You don't get that in electional. You don't get that in horary. Horary and electional are, if you will, more formulaic, more cut and dried. Does that match your?
Yeah. Let's finish this talk with looking at the scene of the traditional astrologers worldwide and in the United States especially. You had this special development with Project Hindsight with Schmidt, Zoller, and
correct.
What was the third one? 3 people.
Robert Schmidt, Robert Zoller, Robert Hand.
Robert Hand, right.
And Bobs.
Yes, that started in the 90s and it didn't really, it wasn't flourishing as it was meant to do.
Well, the problem with that is there was kind of a falling out between the two. So much of work that they did fell out of print.
Yes, which is strange in a time of book on demand. Nobody seems to see a necessity to put this back as a book on demand project. That's a strange thing for me.
And I hope it comes back sometime. Like I'm hoping the estate of Robert Schmidt puts his stuff back in print.
It would be nice if they did some book on demand structure, because that's the modern structure.
I agree. See, and that's where I think I'll call the next wave of translations after that, where the dominating figure is Ben Dykes.
Yes, that's true. How do you see the importance in America? Let's say in Germany, traditional astrology is 10 to 15 years backwards from your status of today. you have Chris Brennan, you have Demetra George, you
Right.
have yourself, you have Benjamin Dykes.
Right.
How many leading figures are in your country? Is that what I just mentioned, or are there more?
I think you've mentioned a lot of the main ones, but I think there's an increasingly large community of people who've been around long enough that they're starting to practice it.
Okay.
And I think it is also a coming of age enough as a community that we're starting to get the rest of the astrologers are having to start to take us seriously now.
Okay.
And I think there is hopefully more dialogue between traditional and modern astrologers, and like more ways that modern astrology can be enriched by awareness of traditional techniques. Like I'll mention, like I do the dignities class at Kepler, I do the predictive class. I assume that my audience includes a fair number of traditional. I assume it includes a lot of modern astrologers who don't know anything about traditional before they get to me. So I'm trying to present it in such a way that it can be of use to them also.
Do you have an impression economically how the field of traditional astrology is gaining momentum in sort of income?
I think it's definitely happening, and I think it's getting increasingly visible and increasingly popular. And that, by the way, if I think about where do my books fit in this niche in the work that I'm doing, well, Ben dominates the field as far as I'm concerned. He's the large scholar. What I'm trying to do is write the approachable, usable, I don't want to quite say entry level because it's a step above that, but here's a way of approaching this extreme complexity of traditional astrology in a way that's structured, that's understandable, that you can start actually using it. I think of myself, if you will, as the entry level course before Ben's advanced course.
Yes, okay.
That's the audience I'm going.
Yeah. Considering your books, how could you guess how many people bought any one of your books in total? Are we talking about 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000?
Not hundred thousands, definitely thousands. I don't know if it's about 10,000, but also, my book sales go up and down. It depends who mentions it on their podcast.
Yes, right.
About it. But my books are consistently selling.
So basically that is an indicator that something is happening.
Right. And that also means that my books have gotten to that beautiful point where it's word of mouth.
Yes.
Hey, this is really good. Check this guy out. And then it begins to get a reputation. Then they look at one book and then they look at others.
Are your books book on demand, or
they're print on demand? Yeah.
So basically you're one of the intelligent people because you are available all over the world. I bought your books on Amazon Germany and it was no problem because they have it on stock.
Exactly. And also what I do is all of my books are available as an ebook in PDF form from my site.
Why don't you offer it on the book on demand, the platform, as an Kindle and ebook worldwide?
There's a couple reasons. Number one, Kindle is just a ghastly mess to format.
Okay.
Everything you're doing with images, it's horrible.
Okay.
And the other reason is if I put it on Kindle and print on demand, Amazon gets the majority of that.
Oh, I see. Okay. Very well. So we have a sort of very nice talk about traditional astrology in the practice of Professor Obert. We will talk after we stop the recording. Thank you very much. And thanks. Danke fürs Vorbeischauen und auf bald.
Okay. And I thank you, sir.
Stop the recording.